Now, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off got a lot of hate on Twitter, and I really mean a lot, but it also got an 8 out of 10 on IMDb, which honestly is not a bad score. Not to mention, it also got a lot of praise from parts of the fanbase, but then there are no plans for a season 2, so what is really going on here? And why has no one so far talked about my biggest issue with the show? Now, I understand there was a lot I just said that we have to dissect, so to make it clear, let's start from the beginning in the mysterious land of Canada. Now, we get to follow Scott Pilgrim, who is kind of an asshole. He's dodging his 17-year-old girlfriend while trying to hook up with the girl of his dreams, Ramona. Now, this is something he manages to do pretty early on, with the only issue being that Ramona has a league of 7 evil exes that Scott has to defeat so he can be together with her. Or, well, that is the original story at least. You see, it's no mere coincidence that this one is named differently from the original. You see, fans had been led to believe by the marketing that this was to be a faithful adaptation, but then in the first episode, Scott dies, aka takes off, and the story shifts focus to Ramona, making this into a parallel timeline. And just for clarification, I am trying very hard to balance backing up and giving context to my claims with spoiling as little as possible. I also want to address some of you who claim that you already knew there would be a twist. I think it's honestly disingenuous to shut down legit critique of the marketing, because you went out of your way to find minor hints that could contradict the majority of the marketing. Now that we got that disclaimer out of the way, I want you to do an exercise with me. I want you to put yourself into the perspective of someone who likes Scott Pilgrim and wants, not to mention has been promised, a faithful recreation. Now, if you did this right, you would probably first of all feel immense disappointment, followed by frustration, and if you've noticed the trend in media lately, maybe you're even fearful that they will mess this up. And it's crucial to understand these fans' emotions if we want to understand what happened with Scott Pilgrim, and it gets even worse. But before we get to that, I just want to say the switch isn't all that bad. It does breathe some new air into the franchise by allowing us to explore Ramona as the main character, which also allows us to dive deeper into the stories of the exes, not to mention the rest of the characters. And to quote the co-creators of the show, the story is designed to be self-contained and completed in one season, which I kinda think they succeed with, and hence there is no need for season 2. Once again, not to mention the animation is straight up masterpiece material, which is clearly illustrated in episode 3 when they fight inside of a video store. And I just wish that more effort was put into why we should care about some of the fights, but let's get back to that later, because the writing is otherwise not bad and even gets good as the mystery starts building up. And to be honest, unlike a lot of critics, I didn't hate the finale. Sure, it was a bit cheesy and some things just felt a bit off, but overall it works. And by the way, if you hate it because of the final fight, I just want to remind you it's not something new to the franchise. However, I can understand why some would hate the finale, not to mention the show in general. You see, while I eventually came around to enjoy it, I was very close to dropping it, and it's for a reason I rarely see people talk about. You see, after the show betrays its fans by not being the faithful adaptation it marketed itself as, episode 2 happens. Let's go back to the mind of the fan. The first episode was good after all, so while depleted of trust, you give it one last chance and watch episode 2. And the first thing you see is the funeral scene, making Scott's death into a joke, which some could see as a spiteful act by the creator to those they just betrayed. However, it's actually not something far-fetched for the series to do, but it kinda misses the mark in my opinion, and even if you enjoy that, which is completely fair, you are then faced with the evil exes conflict. Now, I don't get why people don't shit on this more. This is a running problem throughout the entire show, even if it did peak here. You see, for the majority of the episode, we are watching the build up to a fight and then the actual fight. Or can you even call it a build up if the issue is we have no incentive to care? We don't know what it would imply for Dylan to still be boss or for Matthew to take over. And this is really just a setup for later story points. Now, maybe you counter by saying we should root for Dylan since Matthew killed Scott, but even then we barely got to know Scott, and what we got to know was that he was an asshole. And the worst part is that this is is actually a really easy problem to solve. You start a fight, you cut away to something else happening, and then you cut back as the fight is about to end. We still get the same conclusion out of it, and you still get to set up later story points, but we are not forced to consume a fight we have no reason to care about. You could even cut out the results of the fight entirely to tease the audience as to what the results actually were, and then show them later together with the reveal of Dillion's true manipulative nature. And for a lot of the other fights, just add more stakes to them. But as I said in episode 2, I think they failed at this, and I think a lot of people made up their minds about the show at this point, and I do have to say that if you did, that's fine. As the famous saying goes, if I give you a chocolate bar and you take a bite, you don't have to take another to realize you're eating shit. To continue the metaphor, it's of course sad that only the second row is shit and you're missing out on a pretty good chocolate bar. And if you asked me if the 8 out of 10 on IMDb is fair, I would say it is. And I know I was harsh towards it, but it just goes to show how deeply I think you should critique the things you are a fan of. And if you don't agree with something, that's fine. And going back to the previous metaphor, there are plenty of great chocolate bars like Freeren, which you can find out more about by clicking here. With that said, take care, bye!